So welcome everybody to the May monthly meeting of the EVCO. We have a lot of material today, so I'm just going to skip over to the agenda. So on the agenda today, so the first item is Mary is going to talk to us about OREC, and she'll talk about investment opportunities, I think, with OREC. So Ottawa Renewable Energy Co-op is an organization that's been around for 10 plus years. I guess you'll 15?
13.
13. And thank you, sir. And anyways, Marion will talk about that. I won't steal her thunder. Then Mike probably remembers that he's going to be talking about the state of the EV market share in 2023.
I totally remember that.
You totally. Mike did an excellent presentation that I leveraged for something else that you'll see. It's a really good presentation, talks about where we're at right now. Then we'll have a brief report on our visit to ELMEC. So Sam, myself, and Jorge, we went to see ELMEC in Trois-Rivières and Grand-Mère on April 26th. So very, very interesting visit, and you'll see when we get there. So then Mike again will talk about the news. Lots of news, tons of news. Then we'll talk about past and future events. Not many past events. There's the garage sale that we had last weekend, the garage sale that we were at. But aside from that, we have lots of upcoming events that are scheduled right now and more to come. So you'll see there's a lot there. And at the end, actually, I'm going to talk about a few things, action items that you may want to take. There's 2 surveys you may want to respond to. There's also a program that will save you some money on your electricity bill, which I'll talk to at that time. And I think there's something else. Yes, I'll talk about the OEB, Ontario Energy Board, is having consultations right now on pricing, electricity pricing for people or organizations that provide charging of EVs. So they're talking mostly for fleets and commercial level 3 charging type of installations, right? So you guys probably remember that years ago we heard that the first people who put charging stations in their businesses were, in many cases, they were Tim Hortons, and when they put them in, they got demand charges, and they were surprised by demand charges that were in the tens of thousands of dollars. So, bottom line is OEB is looking at the situation and trying to find ways to get around those issues. So, we'll get to that when we talk about that a bit later. But let me just change the presentation to Marion's presentation.
So hi everyone, and I think now the virtual listeners are seeing just the screen, so I'll talk to you again.
And they will see a corner picture, but it's
that's fine.
Okay, that's good. So my name is Marion Sikirski. I'm the still relatively new general manager of the Ottawa Renewable Energy Cooperative. I say new, I've joined in September 22, but there's so much to learn that I still feel quite new to the job. So we recently traveled to southwestern Ontario, trying to raise some capital there locally there. And as we came back, we realized we need to have a proper slogan, the Ottawa Renewable Energy Cooperative. It's sort of long and clunky. So this is what we came up for. What we're all about is mobilizing community capital for the energy transition. That sort of puts it all in a nutshell, but we'll go into more later. So what are we? We are a cooperative. Are you familiar with cooperatives? Okay, good. Have you actually heard of us before?
I own shares.
I know.
Yeah,
Okay.
Shares. Oh, sorry.
But you've heard of us? You've heard of us? Okay, good, perfect. So we were set up in 2010 by a small group of people that basically set up the co-op to benefit from the feed-in tariff program. So at that time, the government basically, paid fixed rates, very good rates at the time for renewable energy. And during that time, from 2010 to 2018, when the program was cancelled, quite suddenly, we built quite a lot of projects, usually quite small scale projects on housing cooperatives, sort of farms and small scale industrial size places like that. We are a for-profit cooperative. So we are regulated under the Cooperative Corporations Act, and our investments are regulated by the Financial Services Regulatory Authority of Ontario. And what have we accomplished? So over the course of 13 years, we grew to just about 900 members. We have big plans. We want to grow to 2,000. And we have about half of those members are also investors. Very different amounts. We have small investors, medium, we have larger investors, the whole range. We manage 22 solar projects and now 2 wind turbines. We just bought the second wind turbine in April. They're both located in southwestern Ontario. And all of our investors are investing in the whole portfolio. Even though we raise capital on sort of a project basis, the investors benefit from the whole portfolio. As I said previously, the majority of the projects are feed-in tariff projects. And since that program started, we had to think about like what's next. And what's next is sort of a much more difficult business environment for us, and I'll come to that a little later. So the new setup is basically net metering contracts, and we have those with some high schools and the Canadian Museum of Science and Technology down on here. We also have 4 energy efficiency retrofit projects. One is with the RA Centre, another one with Housing Cooperative as well. We've raised more than 11 million from our members and paid back over about 3.5 million in returns, but that includes capital repayments, so it's not just dividends, obviously. So membership is open to anybody in Eastern Ontario, but also because we have projects there, because we have the 2 wind turbines there, and specific Southwest Ontario counties as well. Membership is a one-time $100 investment or payment, and it basically allows you to vote at meetings, vote at board meetings, obviously, and also it gives you the opportunity to invest in the company. Bless you. And you can of course, as you know from your own organization, you encourage members to participate in committees and to contribute to the organization overall. So who are we? We are, I'm the only full-time staff. We've recently recruited a part-time finance manager, and that means we have a very, very dedicated board. So we have 10 board members, and they're all incredibly committed and passionate about the issue and really contribute a whole lot to the organization. They have expertise in a wide range of areas, and yes, they're fantastic. And we even have still some founding members as well. Dick Bucker, who's sort of second to the right there, he's one of the founding members of the co-op, and is very active in the advocacy side of things. So as I said, we have 24 projects in Eastern Ontario and the two wind turbines. 2 of our solar installations are actually bigger, what's called ground mount solar tracking installations. So they're sort of on the ground and they follow the sun.
And the wind turbines are along the
They are, yeah, exactly here and in Zurich, and the other one is in Tiverton, sort of behind the window there. And for some reason, it's not moving on. There it is. Ah, okay. It does fancy stuff now. So how does it work? I think I sort of outlined it a little bit. Basically, we raise capital from our members. We develop projects. We only start raising once we have a project pretty much ready to go, because otherwise, obviously, you need to pay dividends to our members, so that makes no sense. We partner with sort of medium-sized institutions, so not retail, like not individual houses, but bigger buildings, museums, crown corporations, schools, and so on. And our members, once they invest, they benefit from basically the revenue that is generated through those projects. And the electricity, sort of the revenue is generated in different ways. In some cases, it's sold to the grid. In other cases, it's sort of sold to the building. So it depends on it. And yes, as I said, the profits are returned to our investors in the form of capital repayments and interest payments or dividends, depending on the investment vehicle. But just taking a step back, and you will be so very familiar with this, and you've seen this, you've seen this slide before. You know, we need to replace all the fossil fuels with electricity, and I would like to see a much bigger yellow share, obviously, before 2050. I mean, just looking at the recent data again, it's really where the decade now is the one that will make the difference, I think. And I do think, like, organizations like OREC can play an important role in this transition. And that's been shown in other jurisdictions, in other provinces, in other countries as well, where sort of community-owned renewable energy plays a much bigger role than it does here in Canada, or in Ontario, I have to say. So when we look at the electricity grid, what happened and still happened in the past and still happens is a very centralized power grid with sort of big generation capacity, transmission network and the distribution network down to the last building. Where with the net zero transition, we should be going is a much more distributed electricity grid. And I think you will probably all be familiar with sort of that background, where we have smaller scale generation complementing the centralized generation. Centralized generation, we will never get rid of that. That's still necessary, obviously, but it will be complemented by much more local generation as well, combined with storage. And that's where we come in as sort of a small, medium scale generator of electricity. Yes, so now that the feed-in tariff era is over since 2018, sort of we went through different phases of trying to redefine ourselves and trying to see where we fit in. And the way we look at it currently is that we want to be the junior partner for bigger projects that basically bring the community side to the project and the community acceptance to the project. And we know that, for example, with wind projects, there has been opposition to that. So we bring the benefit to the local community, which often reduces that opposition a lot. And yeah, that's where we come in, and not obviously only wind, but also in solar and other generation. So it's a new role for us. It's one that we need to grow into because it's a different animal altogether.
So if I may, just for a second, I just want to explain what the feed-in tariff era was. Okay, so some of you remember probably that up to about, I guess, 5 or 6, 7 years ago, there was the FIT programs you could get for your home or for commercial customers, right? And what those were programs where you were guaranteed a rate for the electricity you produce from your solar installation, right? So way back when, when the first programs were set up, the rates were very high. And the rates were very high to make it profitable to actually deploy solar when solar was still very expensive. As solar became cheaper and cheaper, the tariffs got lower and lower. And about 6 years ago or so, the government decided, this was before DOFO, before Ford, the government decided to eliminate the feed-in tariffs and go to a net metering only, because it was deemed that it was feasible to do at least large-scale solar projects at a profit without any rate subsidies, right? Okay.
Yes, now the challenge, of course, that we face is that the electricity we get from the grid is highly subsidized. So it's difficult for us to compete with that environment because ours is not subsidized. So we need to find a way to manage in that context, because obviously for our partners it's not interesting if our renewable energy is more expensive than the grid electricity. And I think the issue is that people appreciate the very low electricity rates but don't realize that they pay for it in subsidies and taxes anyway. So But that's definitely one of the challenges that we face. It's just the business environment that we have to compete with those very low rates. There are other challenges, and we'll come to that a little bit as well. You know that very well. The distributed energy resources are becoming cheaper than, especially on a larger scale, than centralized energy generation. And the good thing is also they're much quicker to deploy. It's much easier to set up than a big nuclear plant or small modular reactors or gas-fired power plants and so on. The rates that are, the data is from the Clean Air Alliance. The rates for wind and solar is not what we can achieve here in Ontario. That would be for bigger installations than the one that we can provide.
So what are the costs you're able to achieve from Ontario?
We have to get to at least parity with the grid prices, right? That's has to be our aim, with the promise that basically to our partners that the grid prices will increase because they have to. There's no other way, and ours will stay below that. Right? Yeah.
How much longer will we be subsidizing these high prices? When do you believe that we will be able to get to that equity? Cut off
the Band-Aid?
Yes.
That's a good question. I mean, I think it's a very political question, and I don't really have the answer to that. It's becoming, I think, more mainstream knowledge that the electricity prices are so highly subsidized. It was in a CBC article recently. But I think obviously there's no mainstream pressure to increase electricity prices, because I think maybe people aren't realizing that it stymies the development of renewable energy, right? So.
But to the subsidy question in particular, the FIT contracts were 20-year contracts. Mm-hmm. Once they expire, that's it, that's all. Done, right? So the earlier FIT contracts are starting to expire soon, I think.
In about 8 years or so, yeah.
And after that, over time, they'll all disappear, right?
The contracts will disappear, but obviously the assets are still there. Yeah. So we will still generate electricity, and the big question is, what rate are we going to get for that, right? Who knows?
That's fine.
So we have gotten involved in wind in 2021 when we bought together with Enerforge. We bought a wind turbine in Tiverton. And as I said, we've just acquired a second wind turbine in Zurich. So both of them are in southwestern Ontario. And they are also operating under a FIT contract. And what's great about wind, like one wind turbine generates so much more electricity than a solar installation, or even our non-solar installations that are very big. And it also nicely balances our generation portfolio. So the sun shines stronger in the summer and the wind blows stronger in the winter. So in terms of like a revenue flow, it makes a lot of sense for us as an organization. And we are actively seeking local community capital in those counties in southwestern Ontario. In fact, I'm going there next week to try to raise money locally. So in terms of the investment options that we offer currently in the context of this wind turbine acquisition, we offer what we call Class E preference shares. They have a 10-year term. All our shares are RRSP and TFSA eligible. And they pay an annual dividend first time in December 2024. And I have to say, if it is declared by the board. We have paid dividends every year, but that's something I always have to say, we cannot guarantee. But our target for an annual dividend is between 3.5 and 4%. For new investors, the minimum investment is $2,500 for non-registered investments and $5,000 for registered investments. But existing members can invest smaller amounts just to top up. I think I'd also like to talk a little bit about how we doing for timing.
Oh, you got as much as you want.
We're good.
Okay. I'd like to talk a little bit also about the challenges. I mean, one of them is definitely sort of the subsidy issue that I mentioned. The other one is the regulatory framework, and I think that's where also our organizations sort of have overlapping interests. Like right now, basically with the net metering setup the way it is, we can size our projects only to the demand of the recipient, of the host, basically. That's just the way the regulation is set up. If we generate more, we basically have to give it away for free. So that makes no sense. What is possible in other jurisdictions is what's called virtual net metering. You can have a big site, or you can aggregate multiple sites, generate as much as you want, and then sell it to, for example, OREC members. But that's not possible here in Ontario. So that is definitely a challenge. And one of the board members, I mentioned him earlier, Dick Bucker, he's very active together with others in the organization trying to overcome that. And they've worked for years, and there is little movement, but you know, it's something that we have to resolve. The other issue, and that's where we overlap, is what we call single pin multi-meter. So basically, a condo building, if we put solar on a condo building, it can only be, depending on the setup of the metering, it can only be credited to the main account, not to the individual units, which is ridiculous. It's possible technically, but by regulation it's not. So again, it's such and we had a meeting with Hydro Ottawa recently, and sort of my impression was it's obviously not their jurisdiction, but like my comment was, I think it's so minuscule that nobody really looks at that, because it seems so small as an issue that nobody realizes that it needs to be addressed. But it would make a huge difference for us. It would enable us to cooperate with much more housing co-ops, for example, or it would enable us to put solar on buildings and have, you know, multiple EV chargers, stuff like that. So right now that's unfortunately not possible. So that's definitely where our advocacy could overlap in that regard. So those are two of the key issues we're struggling with.
Do you think the new changes to the net metering to allow the time of use net metering, is that going to change the business model much, or what do you see with that coming?
That's not going to change our business model a whole lot. I mean, what it does promote, I guess, is including batteries in our projects, so that you could.
But that new rate, that new policy, I think applies only to residential customers. I think
it does. Yeah,
the commercial, and you're dealing mostly with commercial.
More with bigger projects, exactly. So what's more interesting for us is the tax credit for renewable energy. So that has a bigger impact for us. Just a few sort of visual impressions of our projects. That is one of our ground mount solar tracking projects. This was when it was just built. Right now it's greener, and that's on the Canadian Museum of Science and Technology. It's a fairly small rooftop solar, and was built in 2019. That is the Merbleu High School.
Mark is asking, are OREC projects using battery storage?
Not at the moment. Not at the moment. But that's not, yes, it's definitely a possibility that we're looking at. That is Hobby Industries, sort of a small industrial site in Ottawa South. That's one of our energy efficiency projects at the RA Centre, where we did an LED upgrade. And another of the energy efficiency projects at the Eileen Tallman Housing Co-op, where we installed programmable thermostats and did a complete LED retrofit. Bring this to the end of it. Do you have any questions?
So you said that everyone benefits. So at the end of the day, no matter which project you quote unquote invest in, it's everybody gets a percentage, you know, whatever the board decides for that year.
Exactly.
Based on
the overall portfolios.
Right. So if you put it 5,000 in and it's 3%, you get 3% of your 5,000.
Exactly.
Now, you talked at one point about capital repayment. Is that just because I need some of that money back, so I've asked you for my money back, or what do you mean by capital repayment? What is that?
So it's structured in our different types of shares. So this current offer that we have, the way it's structured is the capital repayment automatically starts already next year. So 5%, for 10 years we pay back 5% of the capital.
Okay,
And then at the end of the 10 years, we pay back the remaining 50%.
okay.
So you don't need, so each preference share is $500 and that value doesn't change. So it's not it's not like in the stock market, but
Okay,
it's a fixed price. Yeah.
So it's kind of like a bond in a way, right?
In a way, exactly.
so I still get whatever the 2% or whatever the 3%, I still get 3% of $500 even though you've paid me back some of the capital, or no?
No, the dividend is on the remaining invested capital.
The remaining invested capital.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I am free to use the return capital to buy more,
Yeah,
buy back.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, yes.
No, you don't want more of your money.
Just check.
They're good. They don't like money.
Yeah, so one thing I want to add to this is that if you think about why would someone want to use OREC or have OREC, use this the wrong word, but have OREC as a partner, right? So if you look at condos or co-ops or the RA Center or others, they don't have capital, right? They struggle to pay the operational budget. So if you look at the RA Center, well, they've got a problem. Every year the budget's tight, so how could they benefit from these new technologies without having to put up capital? So what OREC does is they come over, they make a deal where they pay off the capital over 7 years or whatever the deal is, and the RA Center gets to share some of the savings right away, right? And after the period of years, they own the infrastructure, okay? So that gets rid of a big barrier. So if you're familiar with financing stuff, and I know many of you are, getting capital is often very difficult. There's other industries where you can't get operational only capital. But
Yeah.
most of the housing market is starved for capital, right? And building, same thing, you're starved for capital.
Yeah.
So having OREC come over and provide
That.
the capital really
Yeah.
helps, and also the expertise. Right?
Exactly, I was just going to say, in addition to the capital is also the maintenance and the technical support. So basically our project partners don't have to get involved in that at all.
Yeah.
So it's sort of a whole solution.
Yeah, so for solar, OREC monitors the solar installation and provides
And
reporting
maintains
and maintains it,
stations.
right? So you don't, as a partner, you don't have to do anything, you let them worry about the problems. Okay. Any other questions?
Are you looking for investment anytime or only when you have a project?
Only when we have a project. So we have a capital raise right now. The offering statement that sort of provides the framework for these capital raises expires at the end of August. But we finish raising capital once we've achieved our goal.
Is there a minimum investment amount?
So 2,500 for non-registered and 5,000 for registered.
Plus $100.
Plus the share.
One-time
The share,
membership.
exactly. What the board decided just recently was also to allow other co-ops to invest in us and also member-owned corporations, so small member-owned corporations.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. So for some people that makes it more interesting.
Yeah.
Mark has a question online. Is OREC thinking of working with housing developers to help build net zero homes?
Yes, we are in contact with a number of developers that are building net zero homes.
Yeah, providing capital though for them?
Well, to build our projects, yeah.
Okay.
But it's very early sort of contact.
Okay.
Nothing specific.
Maybe you should talk after. There's Landark, I don't know if you know Landark Developments.
Yes, I think we came
Watercolor
across
in Westport.
exactly. We came across them at the at that event.
Yeah, so I just went to visit them last week and it was kind of interesting what they're doing.
Exactly. Yeah, we're in contact with them amongst others. Yeah.
Cool. Any other questions? Well, thank you very much, Marion. If you're interested in investing, I'm an investor, a member and investor. And you know, I bought a gift a couple of years ago. I bought a gift to my kids. I bought a portion of, well, it's at the time when the first windmill was purchased. So I gave them some shares to make them feel as if they have an interest in
That's great.
this stuff, right? So Mike, maybe you could do the same thing with your kids.
Yeah, I just need to scratch together $2,000.
Okay.
We'll become a member.
Yeah,
That's
I can do $100, but I don't know if $2,000 is a
That
lot.
was great.
Well,
Or you
thank,
just join a newsletter, that's also
There you go.
wonderful.
well, thank you very
Thank
much.
you so much. Do you mind if I hand around the newsletter sign up?
Oh, no problem. Yeah, no problem.
Okay, so I'm here to talk about the status of EV adoption in Canada because StatCan came out with new data, and I do love new data. So I'll be talking about how, well, there's some spoilers here in the overview, but there you go. EVs they're outselling diesel cars now. They are outselling hybrids. Gas cars are on their way out. Plug-ins are seeing exponential growth. The Osborne effect might be kicking in. I'll talk about that if you don't know what that is. EVs are on a path to dominate by the end of the decade, as we have been talking about since 2017 when I made my prediction. And I'll talk a bit about government mandates. All right, so as I mentioned, diesel is dying, which is good because I used to have a diesel and it's gone now. Dieselgate. Anyway, EVs outside diesels now by a wide margin, 10,000 units per quarter almost. The first time they outsold the diesels was in the third quarter of 2021. So this data is up to the end of 2022. There's no 2023 data yet because there's a lag, right? So they've outsold diesels now for 5 of the past 6 months. You can see it on the table there. And they are outselling diesels on an annual basis now. So there are now more EVs per quarter being sold than diesel cars, which is great. And for those Toyota lovers, I have some bad news for you. Electric cars are also outselling hybrids now. So they outsold them the first time ever in Q1 2020. That was a fluke because probably COVID had something to do with that. Now lately they've been regularly outselling hybrids. They've beat them 3 of the last 4 quarters. Hybrids have stalled. The sales of hybrids have stalled, and they only climbed 2% per year. Electrics have outsold them on an annual basis now in 2022 as well. So look for that to continue into the future. Gas vehicles. I love this chart because it shows very clearly they're going down. So they are in a consistent and stable decline. It's spiky because gas vehicle sales, well, all car sales are actually very seasonal. What's really cool about this chart as a data nerd is Q2 2020, because so you can see every other year, Q2 is like the peak, right? Like that's always the highest. But in 2020, it wasn't. Any guesses as to why that is? COVID, right? So that's what COVID did. So it just prolonged it to Q3 of 2020. So there's still a peak, but it was delayed by a quarter. But you can see it's a very clear downward trend. In fact, the second quarter, the highest quarter of last year and of every year except 2020, was lower than the worst quarter of 2017, or even 2018 even. So that's pretty interesting, right? Yeah, it is down 40. So the peak from 2022 is down 40% from the peak of just 2017, just a few years ago, right? So we are now 40% down peak to peak, which is really cool. But yeah, that's neat data, right? At least I think it's neat data. So a little Titanic graphic there, sinking ship, you know.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
Is this because of EVs or because of...
Oh, I'll talk about that in a second.
Okay.
Yeah, it'll be the Osborne
Other
effect.
factors.
Yeah, you'll see. All right, good. The sinking ship. Okay, so what about other fuels, right? Because there's other stuff supposedly out there. Mostly, so they lump the data in for other fuels as other, but it consists of hydrogen, CNG, and some other random stuff that isn't really worth talking about. So those sales have also been trending downward. 2021, 5 other fuel vehicles were sold in all of Canada, and that was only in the first quarter of 2021. So like 5 for the whole country. Last year they did better. They sold 18. So that includes your hydrogen cars, right? So there were 18 of them sold last year. But the total fleet has actually shrunk overall. So now they're down to just 230 vehicles total for the whole country. So hydrogen is not happening. Sorry, guys. Okay, so on the flip side, the things that are increasing and sort of eating some lunches are plugins. So plug-in hybrids are steadily increasing, slow but steady, right? But EVs are on an exponential curve. Demand is increasing, as we know. Every quarter, it gets higher and higher. And there are years-long backlogs, right? So demand is very strong for EVs. And we know this because you talk to the public. Raymond has a question.
Well, question, comment. So I believe that the PHEV thing we're seeing there is largely because of Toyota, like you were saying earlier.
Possible, yeah.
Right? Because Toyota has a part.
Because they have the primes,
else,
yeah.
right?
And they have a lot of brand loyalty. PHEVs they've always kind of been a bridge technology. They're not going to be the future. They're just sort of filling a gap right now. So I don't expect them to go exponential. What was that, Sam?
It's the worst of two worlds.
It's kind of the worst of two worlds. I don't see them going exponential like EVs clearly are. I see them as being a bridge technology that'll peter out probably by the end of this decade or so. But anyway, there you go. So these are the cool charts. So the Osborne effect, getting to your question. So the chart on the right with the orange square on it, so that was produced by a guy, Ross Tessian. He's an analyst from Seeking Alpha. And I saw this article in 2018 when he wrote it, and I was like, that's an interesting article. He wrote it about the US, and the numbers on that chart don't apply to Canada, so don't read anything into the numbers. Just look at the shape of the graphs, okay? And what he described in his article was that what's gonna happen, or what his predictions were back in 2018, was that the overall car market will decline for several years as ICE sales drop and EV sales increase, because there's going to be a gap, right? And what's happening is the Osborne effect, where people, they order their EV of choice, like they want their Scout SUV, or they want their Rivian, or they want whatever. But it takes a while for those cars to actually get to market, and so they're holding off purchasing a new ICE car in anticipation of getting an EV in a few years, like 2 or 3 years. And so what's happening is people are not buying ICE cars as much, because an EV is coming, right? And so you're seeing the overall car market decline because the EVs haven't caught up enough, but the ICE cars are tanking, right? And we're starting to see signs that this actually might be happening here, right? Because you can see on the left, this is our current data from StatCan, where it's looking like it's following that trend where the overall market is declining, gas cars are declining faster, EVs are slowly ramping up exponentially, but it takes a while to build steam. So based on our numbers, I see the crossover point. They have it 2025 for the US. I don't think that's going to happen. We're more looking at like 2027 with maybe 700,000 units. So when we have 700,000 vehicles sold in Canada, that should be, they would have the same for ICE, right? So 1.4 million total. Our current sales annually are 2 million a year. So we're still looking at some declines overall. But we'll see. This is just, it's a projection. So don't sue me if it's wrong.
So my one curve you didn't talk about is the
oil
barrels per day. And
yeah.
So I'll be preparing a presentation for KCOR in November.
Okay.
We'll talk about this kind of stuff. And if you look at the chart there, the way it's illustrated, within a 5-year period or so, it's about a 30%, 33% reduction in the amount of oil, right?
Yeah. I didn't look into the oil at all, so I didn't want to talk about it because it's not.
So so I expect that in a few years we'll start seeing an inflection point and start seeing a rapid decline.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense. As more of the fleet gets replaced with electric vehicles, the demand for oil is going to crash over time.
That and the cars are more efficient too.
And the cars are more efficient, so yeah. So there should be a decrease in oil. I didn't look into any oil stuff. I didn't want to look. That's a whole different ballgame. I'm just focusing on the car sales right now. But yeah, oil should also go down per what the chart is predicting.
In the end, that's what we want, right?
That's what we want, right? Got to stop burning stuff. Okay. So the way that I did this projection is called a Bass diffusion model. It's also known as the market adoption curve. There's like formulas here. It's all math stuff. There's like a little graphic I did, math. But basically, it's a differential equation. It's not that complicated. It was published in 1969 by Dr. Frank Bass. He wrote a paper about consumer durable goods. Cars would be a durable good in this case. It basically what it is it's a mathematical formula that describes how the distribution curve works, basically. So what happens is the first couple people will get an EV or a new thing. They'll get an iPad or they'll get a flat screen TV or whatever. And they're the innovators, right? They're the evangelists. They go out and they convince 2 friends, right? And those 2 friends are like, oh my God, that's really cool. I want to get one too. And so they get theirs. And then they go and tell 2 friends and then they go tell, right? And so it starts to grow exponentially. And that's basically what this model describes, right? Because it's the more people in the market with the new thing, the more likely the probability is, or the higher the probability that a new person will adopt the thing, right? That's the gist of it. So I found a guy, Matthias Brandwinder. He just put the math into a table, like into an Excel sheet for me. He didn't do it for me, he just published it on the internet for free and I stole it. And then I just put in the numbers, right? Because he made it super easy. So you just put in the variables that are required for the formula to work, and then it'll run the table and like predict everything. So it was actually really like anybody could do this. It's not magic, but it was very convenient because that's what Excel's for, right? It's for doing math. So anyway, the midpoint that it calculated, I mean, you can see the variables I put in back in 2017 are there. Midpoint was 2028. It's supposed to top out around 2033 is you have to give it the sort of end state. I chose 99% because nothing's ever 100%, but whatever. So I could be wrong on the peak, the actual market size, but I figured 99% is probably good enough. And yeah, so that's the math. So this is what it spit out. So the red line, as some of you probably already know, is the forecasted data from 2017. The blue line is actual data. So since 2017, I haven't updated the model. I've just been adding the current data next to it to see how good the model was. And at first I was like, this model's super optimistic. Everyone's gonna, like, no one's gonna believe me, so I didn't tell anybody about it. But after a few years, it's like, hey, it's actually not too bad. Like, it's not that far off.
It's actually conservative.
And it's actually on the conservative side. You can see in 2020, there was a dip where they sort of started to match a bit better. And that's because of COVID, right? So if anything, it's a bit less optimistic than real life. So that's really cool. So it's predicting for 2023, as you can see, 10.73%. Now, forget the decimals, nothing's that precise, but the broad stroke, so 10% of the EV market, or 10% of the new car market in Canada this year, in 2023, will be electric. So that's 1 in 10. Last year was 8.17, so we're almost at 10 anyway. So I fully expect 2023 will be like 11, maybe 12% if we're lucky, but at least 10% will be electric by the end of this year, which is really cool. All right, and then there's the government's unambitious ban. Right, so everyone's aware that the government's banned ICE cars by 2035, and so I decided to plot them onto the graph as well, just to see. And it clearly looks like the person that came up with the targets did not use math. They used some other means.
Their kids' Crayolas. Maybe something that they pulled out of a drawer, I don't know. But you can see it's a really squiggly line. It makes no sense logically. And based on our projections and existing data, it's probably a little pessimistic. So we're going to beat it regardless of these rules. And like some companies like GM have already announced they're going to stop selling ICE vehicles by that date anyway. So I don't know if the mandate is the egg or the chicken in this case, but either way, I think the mandate's not very aggressive. They should probably up those numbers a lot just to push the industry a bit faster.
Yeah, so I've been talking to dealers a lot lately, and Toyota told me that they cannot get a BZ4X to sell in Ontario because we don't have a mandate.
Yeah.
So everything goes to Quebec and BC, right? So one of the piece of
so this should help that.
Well, one piece of feedback we gave though is if they're going to do this, it should start in 2024. Not in 2026.
Yeah, it should start next year because 2026. I mean, so the mandate in 2026 is calling for 30% of EV vehicles to be EVs. We're going to be well above that. We're going to be at like 69% by that time, right? So it's like, what are you talking about, right? Actually, no, we're not. So no, hang on.
No, 20%.
They're saying 20%. We're going to be at 30. Yeah, so we're going to be already above the mandate anyway. So that means the manufacturers won't have to try; they'll just meet it by default.
which is not the point of the mandate.
But if there was a mandate, it would still
Yeah.
help because then we would have cars available,
Sure.
right? But it should be more ambitious.
Well,
Yeah.
the other difference is that it's per manufacturer, right? So it stops like one particular manufacturer from being lazy and, you
Yeah,
know, because even if the market is 30%, you know, Toyota might not be.
they might not be. That's
Yeah,
fair.
but
That's
they
a
can-
good.
but
that's a
they
good-
can sell credits.
They can trade
They can still
credits.
go credit, but it's
So,
still a financial incentive.
To a point.
You know, it's a strong financial
Yeah.
incentive, so.
yeah, where it gets really egregious is 2030. That's where the numbers come. But whatever. So, an ambitious mandate, and that is all I have for you today. I think.
Questions?
Any questions, comments, concerns?
No, those numbers that you were talking about, that's only fully electric. You're not including any plug-in.
No, these
hybrids.
are from, so the way that StackCan bins them is plug-in hybrids count as EV, so they're plug-in sales.
Right.
But as you can see earlier, if I go back,
The PHEVs are not
There.
going up, right?
so the PHEVs account for like a tiny fraction of these sales anyway, so it's not worth worrying about. Like they'll be electric. And honestly, a PHEV, like I used to own one, and 2/3 of your driving's electric anyway, so they're basically EVs. So I have no problems lumping them in because they will be phased out and replaced by EVs anyway.
So in 2035, so the way, if you look at it in more detail, you'll see that they allow PHEVs for a while in
Yeah.
those numbers, but at some point they phase them out. In 2035, there's
Yeah.
no PHEVs.
But
left.
if you include PHEVs, then that means you catch the Bolts and the Pacificas and stuff, and so it's fair.
Terry has a question online.
Go ahead.
Your statement about the government mandates, they just recently were doing the input for it. Is that the old mandate or the new mandate?
I'm not sure.
They were doing the what, sorry?
Remember that we were asked
For the input, that's for the proposed mandate, the
Oh, okay.
proposed numbers, which is what Mike has here on the screen, the GOC targets. That's what's being proposed and should be adopted if there's no changes.
Yeah.
And that's the next question. So we've heard that they adopted, or they come back and
I haven't heard anything.
The wheels of government turn slowly though, so probably not.
Yeah, but the other thing I've heard is, so mentioned before, Quebec and BC have
Provincial
mandates
level,
already
yeah.
at the provincial level. Quebec has just changed their mandate, and it's again a proposal. The way this works is they have a proposal. There's a consultation period, and after a while, it becomes the law of the land, right? So the government of Quebec targets are quite a bit more aggressive than even our numbers. So they're good targets that will push the industry to move in the right direction.
Yeah, because basically the red line in this case is sort of the natural state of the market. So you want to, if you're going to do any sort of legislative action, you want to encourage it to happen faster, right? You got to, the way the adoption curve works is that like you can slide it, like you can compress it in time and make it steeper, right? And that's what we want the government to do, is compress the thing that's going to happen anyway and make it happen faster, so that rather than hitting the market saturation at 2035, you hit it, 3 years early or something, right?
Do you have the government projections without the mandate here? You don't have them in this presentation?
No,
Okay.
no, because they were all over the map.
Well, their projections are quite
They're
a
all
bit lower.
linear. Well, they're all linear, right? So
Yeah, they're quite a bit lower than all the projections you see on this screen here.
yeah,
So they're thinking that this mandate is going to make a huge difference. We're thinking, well, maybe it'll make a difference.
it'll help a little.
Nowhere near what they think it's going
Yeah.
to do, right? So,
Anyway.
any other questions?
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you, Mike. Good job.
You'll see me in the news.
Like, in a good way?
No,
Not on TV, the perp walk, no, not the perp walk.
No, like the news, coming up. Coming up next.
This is over. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.
So let's talk about the visit we did to ELMEC. So on April 26th, myself, Sam, and Jorge, we went to Grand-Mère, which is close to Shawinigan, and Trois-Rivières then after, and visited ELMEC. So I'm not going to spend too much time talking about the whole place, but there we go.
Point at the thing and stand on the triangle.
Okay, so
Far away, yeah.
I'm too far away. Okay. In Grand-Mère, this is the old facility, okay? So in the outside, you see Sam there inspecting the level 3 charger. So EV Duty had level 3 chargers. They're no longer manufacturing them for a variety of reasons. They may start manufacturing them again in the future, but they didn't think it was a good business at this point. They're focusing on the consumer space.
With the
And management systems to manage multiple chargers. So here, this is the plant you see on the right-hand side. Pretty primitive, right? So that's where they actually assemble the units. So very primitive at this point, very artisanal, but you'll see that they're going to Trois-Rivières. So they're moving to Trois-Rivières, and this is what the facility looks like. So for those of you who've been at some of the other presentations we had before, this is a mass timber construction. Okay, so aside from the floor and some of the little walls you see there, everything is made out of timber, okay? It costs him more to do that, but he wanted to do that because as we've discussed when we talked about mass timber buildings actually sequester carbon in the timber, whereas if you're building with steel and or concrete, the production processes for steel and concrete emit lots of greenhouse gases, right? So concrete represents about 7 to 8% of global emissions, and steel represents about 7 to 8% of global emissions, so a total of 15%. That's a big chunk, okay? So what he did is, because he could do it, then he owns a place and just decides what he wants to decide.
Actually, a lot of people were discouraging him. The insurance company didn't want to cover it.
Yeah,
and
but he said, that's what I want,
that's what's
build
going
it.
to happen.
Okay, so this is great. This is someone who's actually looking at the environment and all that. Drives an electric car, right? And actually, he's got a Model 3 that rattles a lot, right? But anyways.
And his nephew was
As
a
a
company
Mach-E.
car.
Yeah, as a Mach-E.
Mach-E.
Yeah, and actually, one thing I'll point out here, I did that thing works. The pointer works. You see these things here. Actually, people on on YouTube or on the Teams won't see this, but if you look at the picture on the left, you see some trays there that look like fairly flat black trays. Those actually are enclosures that have 2 volt batteries. So the batteries are, if you've ever seen the volt battery, there's a flat portion, then there's a bump. Well, they've got 2 of those, inverse one on top of the other, into an enclosure, okay? And these are used batteries that come from damaged vehicles, right? So they were able to get them they were salvaged, so they're relatively inexpensive for them to build, right? And what they're doing with that, which is really cool, is on the right-hand side there, that's their autonomous tractor. And what they do with that is that the one you see there, you see the yellow things at the bottom there? Those are to actually do weeding of a field. Okay, so the idea is to use the tractor that's autonomous and has got a lot of intelligence in it to weed what needs to be weeded and nothing else. It also deploys, there's a version that deploys pesticide, and it deploys pesticide only where there's a need for pesticide. So it's supposed to reduce pesticide use by 85%, which is great, right? It saves money, but also it's much better for the environment. As most of you probably know, pesticides are a serious problem in agriculture, right?
And they also plow fields and do regular tractor stuff.
Yeah. So, but the bottom line is, if you look at this is the first prototype they have. It's an 18-wheeler trailer there you see on the left-hand side. And the way at the left, you see at the bottom, there's an area there. That's where the battery enclosures that we saw earlier fit in. Okay, and the tractors fit on top. And you see this sort of probe here.
On the left side.
Right there. Yeah, I'll point here, there. This thing here. Okay. That is what they use to charge. I can't remember
2,000
what. 2,000 amps.
Amps, yeah, sorry. Amps.
Yeah, it does 2,000 amps. They bought this off the shelf, and they don't need that kind of power, but they bought that because they could get it off the shelf and it works, right? So there's a little robotic thing there where the probe will actually come out and meet the tractor. So this is all autonomous. The tractor, when it runs out of battery, will go back in the truck and will charge itself, right? So bottom line is They use a drone, they do a survey of the field. Once they've done a survey of the field, they let these things loose and they work the field. And then they come back to the truck to recharge or to finish the job, right? To park themselves once they're done. Okay, so very, very cool technology. Very, very cool. So anyways, very interesting company to visit. The guy, Jean-Marc, the owner, is a very special guy. He's originally from Switzerland, and his background is dairy farming. So that's why he was working on tractors for one thing. I'm not too sure exactly how he got into charging stations, but anyways, he's doing that and doing quite well. So, and actually one of the things we were able to do, and I've got it here, I think. Yeah, so we got a charging station, we got a box with the wires and all that, not the guts inside, so it's non-functional, but we got an EV duty charging station essentially that we could put on our board, and I'll show a picture of the board what it looks like today. But we got that for free from them. We also got the current sensor thing for it, so we could put it on the board. And so you could hit yours back, yeah. So we could show how this works when we do events, right? Jorge is in contact with engineers because he wants to do projects to control chargers. So he's actually been using my EV duty charger at home to do some experimentation. But also ELMEC is shipping him a charging station so he can work with it in his lab. And Sam actually spent a bit of time talking to their engineers about they have solutions to manage.
His name was Sam too.
His name is Sam too?
Sam's.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyways, we won't hold it against him. So.
He's a very smart guy.
He is pretty smart. Anyways, so they're working on, they've got power sharing devices for up to 50, I think, that they sell right now, 40?
Yeah.
To 40 different charging stations at one time. They're developing some for up to 100 or 200 or something? 200? So they're doing a lot of stuff, and we're hoping that Sam could do some work with them to work
We have
out
a
the project.
project
Right?
for maybe 280.
Yeah. Yeah, so Sam and I are working, Sam also is working on a project to equip a building with 280 spots. So the type of infrastructure that these guys can deploy would actually meet the requirement there, okay? So I think that's it for that. There you go, so back to Mike.
Back to me for the news. News you can use.
Mark was worried that you weren't going to talk about the Tesla news.
Don't worry, Mark. Don't worry. Got you covered, bud. I'm going to start with other stuff, though, because Tesla's always at the end. Tesla corners last, always. You guys know this. Okay, so new EPA rules in the U.S. They mandate 60% of new U.S. car sales in 7 years. So they want to have between 54 and 60% of new car sales by 2030 being EV, up 10% from the previous target of 50%. Canada's current target for 2030 is also 60%. But as we mentioned earlier, our projections show that it'll actually be around 70% in Canada. So even our targets need to be upped by probably 10% just to break even. Right now in the US, only 5.8% of new cars were electric with plug-ins, whereas we were at 8 and going for 10 this year. So the US is about a year behind us as far as EV adoption rates go. But this is good. They're upping their targets. That should help. Bye-bye Bolt. So GM announced this month that it will be ending production of the Bolt, both variants. For those of you who have short memories like me, it only launched in 2017. And it only just got its second variant, the Bolt EUV, during a midlife refresh, like not that long ago. So like last year, right?
Year, yeah.
So well, it was last year, like 2022, yeah. Right? So, I mean, killing it now is a bit sad, right? It's only been 6 years. 23,000 have been delivered to Canadians. What it means for GM, and I can understand sort of why they're doing it, because right now the Bolt is on the BEV2 platform, but everything that they want to release going forward will be on the Ultium EV platform. It's a totally different architecture. So they will be launching 3 new EVs this year, including the Silverado EV, the Blazer EV, and the Equinox EV, which will take the spot of the Bolt as the cheapest EV on the market, basically, the Equinox. So stuff is happening, but yeah, it's sad to see the Bolt go because those who have them love them. TTC confirms an order for 340 new e-buses. So they have 60 e-buses on the road already versus Ottawa's 4, OC Transco. The new contract, it wasn't published, but rumors have it that it's a 60-40 split between New Flyer and Novabus. OC Transco also plans on purchasing a whole bunch of new e-buses with the TTC being the contract, like under the TTC contracts, basically, we're going to piggyback on theirs. We're supposed to have the first batch of 26 entering service this year. That's not looking like it's going to happen. OC Transco's contract should be announced any day now. Like they literally are piggybacking on this thing from TTC, but they've been silent about it so far. And then according to the OC Transco plans, 77 are supposed to enter service next year, but that's also probably not going to happen. So we are waiting with bated breath to see what OC Transco is doing. At least the TTC has confirmed that they have a bunch of new buses on the way, although they haven't released any details. So watch this space. Saskatoon, the backwards province of Canada that still likes coal and hates EVs. So they got a bunch of money from the federal government. So I guess conservatives do like subsidies and government money, I guess, I don't know. But anyway, they're going to study a zero emission transit thing. There's no timeline for when they'll take their first e-buses, but they are starting to look into it. So even the very regressive conservatives in Saskatchewan are starting to see that like oil is dying and maybe it's time to move on to cleaner, better, new things. If you're a fan of Volvo, and who isn't, because Volvo is awesome, their newest EV has just leaked accidentally, and it was by themselves. Like they put it up on their own website and then took it down immediately, but people on the internet are people on the internet, and they screen capped everything. And so somebody found it, they saw it on the selector. It used to be shrouded, and then the shroud disappeared for a second, and so they screen capped it, and then it showed up again. But it's the EX30, it's a small EV, it's supposed to be entry level, and it's meant for new car, like first time car buyers apparently. So hopefully that means it's gonna be cheap, but it is a Volvo, and Volvos are not cheap, so we'll see how that works out. They're gonna debut the thing next month anyway, so I'm sure we'll have better pictures in next month's news. But this is what it looks like. It looks pretty good. Little hatchback SUV thing. They've been teasing parts of it, like headlights and bumpers and stuff, for months now. But now we get the whole car, so it's like, okay, yeah, it looks like a Volvo. Yeah, it's supposed to have the lowest carbon footprint of any Volvo car ever, because they have that zero carbon steel that they're working on and stuff. So, yeah, pretty cool. Rivian shared a sneak peek of the R2 SUV, so keeping in line in the theme of somewhatly more affordable mass market EV SUVs, I guess. The R2 is going to be their high volume stablemate to the R1S and the R1T, right? So clever naming conventions there. Rivian CEO RJ Scaringe on the left showed the clay model. It was shrouded in fabric, of course, alongside his chief designer Jeff Hammoud. This was on their Instagram story. There was just like somebody asked a question about it, and so they showed this picture. But it won't be released until 2026, so save up your pennies if you want a Rivian. And in Canada, it'll probably be a bit longer than that, so yeah. Wind and solar combined produced more power than coal in the US this year for the first time, Q1. So for all those people who are like, well, the grid is coal, right? Not anymore, right? This is according to the U.S. Energy Information Administration. Wind and solar combined, mostly wind, but solar was in there too. They outproduced coal, and the numbers are there on the slide to show it. So there you go. And in March alone, wind produced by itself almost as much as coal for that month. So that's pretty fantastic. And that's just getting better because coal is the most, wind is the most rapidly deployed new form of energy in the U.S. And coal is rapidly being phased out because it's literally cheaper to build an entirely new wind farm from scratch than to keep an existing coal plant running. So look for this to continue and get better, and eventually all those people that chirp at us about coal power can just go away because there won't be any. Raymond sent me this story, I think with a little smirk attached. So over half of the UK's hydrogen stations are now closed. So October last year, the UK had 11 whole hydrogen refueling stations for the massive fleet of 196 cars. And they've closed half of them now, so there's only 5 left. So if you're a hydrogen car driver in the UK, you can now hang out around London Heathrow Airport or Aberdeen, Scotland. But I don't know if you can get between the two because the chargers in between, or the refueling stations in between have gone. Motive Fuels is the company behind the stations. They operated them under the Shell brand. And they said that there's not enough demand, they can't make money, it's not a strong business case. They can't sustain the pumps, so they're just shutting them down because they need to save capital and whatnot. So there's only 2 cars for sale in the UK anyway that can use hydrogen, the Nexo and the Mirai. And yeah, so there's only 176 on UK roads, down from 196 in 2020, so not even 200 cars. So yeah, you can't make a business on that. Speaking of public infrastructure, I guess, public chargers in Canada grew by 30% since the start of last year.
I know that term.
Yeah, I know. I use this picture a lot. But yeah, so our EV network grew in Canada by 30%, which is pretty cool. Now, some of those are level 2s, right? And the numbers are all up on the slide if you want. But a bunch of them are level 3s. Various networks plan on installing another 4,000 DCFCs over the next couple of years. I counted them manually because nobody had that information, but I went through every single one and I added them all up in Notepad because I don't know why I didn't use Excel, but you know, whatever. Notepad it was. So that was fun. Tesla is responsible for almost 1,500 fast chargers of the total installed last year. So that's a lot. And, oh yeah, no, I won't have any spoilers, but you'll see in the next couple slides or something cool about Tesla. Did I say something nice about Tesla? Whoa, what is happening? Must be the beard. I know, right?
You should have warned everybody to sit down.
No, sit down. Take a breath. All right, so Flow plans on doubling its fast charging ports. So they got a bunch of money, 220 million from the infrastructure bank, the CIB, to build 2,000 ultra fast charging ports. That's what you see in the picture there, those cool new things that they announced. It was in the news a couple months ago. They're going to focus, they said, primarily on the GTA, which they feel is their biggest, most important market. So fair enough. But the chargers will be located at 400 sites across the country along major highways. So that's all good stuff. So more is better. And so we're going to get a lot of these very soon.
And Flow has historically been quite reliable.
Oh yeah, Flow chargers are super duper reliable. So yeah.
The old chargers, we'll see about the new.
We'll see about the new ones.
Yeah.
To be seen, but like,
we'll fix any problems.
yeah, they're a pretty decent charging
Flow
company.
also focused on 50 kilowatt chargers,
Yeah.
and it's easy to have something reliable at that amount of energy.
Yeah.
Versus if you look at the one you had there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we'll see how it works out. But their new chargers look pretty good, and Flow's a decent, like they're a pretty solid company when it comes to that. So hopefully they're out of Shawinigan. So represent Quebec, I guess. Yeah. Okay, now we're in the Tesla corner, so everyone can get excited by the news that everyone I'm sure is waiting for. But we're not going to talk about that yet. So I'm going to drag you along a little bit longer. So non-Tesla supercharging is coming to Canada this year, and this is actually of particular interest to us here in Ottawa, because this wasn't announced by Tesla. This was announced by the government of Canada, sort of without Tesla acknowledging it, I guess. But anyway, so they have agreed to open part of their supercharging network to non-Teslas from Ottawa to Sudbury this year as a pilot program, which means they will be installing the magic docks. And that'll fix the Mattawa problem, that there's a gap. For those of you who don't know, there is a gap over, can I talk? Please? No? Okay. There's a gap over Algonquin Park where you need some long legs in your EV to make it.
Tesla has a gap there too.
They have a gap there too, but anyway, They will be expanding this program gradually along the Trans-Canada Highway between Ottawa and Calgary. So, yay, something outside of Toronto. The world does exist outside of Toronto. They plan to have 750 stalls ready for non-Teslas by the end of 2025, and at least 350, so almost half of them, will be over 250 kilowatts, which is good for me and Sam.
Up to.
And anybody with Hyundai Kias, or Porsches, I guess. So 250 kilowatt V4s, which will be sick. So hopefully with the V4s, they set up a new one sort of in Marathon. Tesla, if you're watching, Marathon. Not Marathon, what am I talking about? Mattawa. Well, also Marathon too.
Mattawa.
Mattawa needs a charger. Mattawa, Ontario, look it up. That's where you need to put one.
That's
Everybody.
a perfect spot between North Bay and Ottawa.
Yeah, it's perfect. And Electrify Canada too, do that too. Just like, call
Brantford
over.
would be better.
No,
Whatever.
Mattawa.
No
It's
Mattawa.
on the way to Algonquin Park.
Yeah,
Whatever.
but from Mattawa you can.
Anyway, Model Y was the best-selling vehicle in the world in the first quarter of 2023. This is the first time an EV has ever reached that #1 spot, and it ousted the Toyota RAV4 and the Corolla.
The Corolla, yeah.
But the RAV4 was actually outselling the Corolla for a bit there. So
So the numbers I saw had Corolla higher, but
yeah,
the thing to keep in mind with the Corolla is it's half the price of this.
yeah. Well, that's it, right? So the numbers are at the bottom there. Corolla outsold stuff last year as a whole, but like quarterly, the RAV4 has been doing really well. But the Model Y beat both. So booyah. Take that, Toyota. Actually, interesting, of the top 5, all of them are Toyotas except the Tesla. So there you go. So Toyota should start, getting a little nervous if they're paying attention. Probably not. Whatever. All right. So here's the news that Craig has been bugging me about. All right. Ford announced a partnership, surprise, with Tesla, and they plan to adopt the Tesla connector. I'm not calling it the damn North American charging standard, whatever the hell they want it, because it's not the standard. Whatever. Tesla connector. So they're partnering with Ford. Well, Ford's partnering with Tesla, so all the Fords will somehow have access to the supercharger network immediately. Starting next year, with an adapter, I guess they'll have to buy. And then starting in 2025, they will have the Tesla plug instead of CCS. So that'll be different.
So my understanding is every existing Ford customer will get the adapter for free.
For free.
And the cars starting in 2025 will have
The plug.
only the Tesla plug on it.
Yeah.
Now, I have a bit of a concern there because my understanding is the Tesla plug is unidirectional, it's not bidirectional.
See, yet another thing.
I read the standards, I can comment on all these things. So, in the NACS standard document, it does specify support for bidirectional,
Okay.
but it doesn't currently have details on how that's, like what the protocol will be. But I want to remind everyone that in the plug wars, all we're committing to is the shape of the plug. Right?
Yeah.
Anything else can be updated with software or future standards. So in the debate between CCS and NACS, the one advantage CCS has is it's just bigger, which means there's more space for cooling. But NACS, they demonstrated it's capable of pretty much the type of power we want on consumer vehicles anyway. So in terms of the debate between the two, honestly, it's a toss-up. I don't really care what
It doesn't really matter.
It doesn't really
As long as
matter.
we have one.
As long as we have one, and that's the problem, is that now
And
that
the
Ford's
thing is,
thrown
like,
its hat in.
Ford is open a new can of worms here.
Yeah.
Because before it seemed clear, like, okay, we're just going to go towards CCS. The
CCS
fact
like
that
Europe.
Tesla was getting
Tesla had
$100
the-
was almost
In
endorsement
Europe,
of
in
that.
Europe, they have CCS type 2.
And the thing is, like,
So this muddies the water quite a bit, and it'll be
if
interesting
Ford
to see.
vehicles get those adapters, that means you're going to have like Lightnings and Mach-E's pulling up to V3 or earlier superchargers with the short cables, and now you're going to be able to plug the car in.
Yeah, this opens a whole can of worms and some problems, so it'll be interesting to watch what happens.
Well, but maybe Ford is gonna put a cable with that or something, maybe they'll figure out a way to.
Well, yeah.
Who knows?
Or maybe Tesla will retrofit
Extension
longer
Ford, I guess.
cables, who knows?
Well, we'll see.
Maybe the adapter will have a cable on it. That'd be super elegant.
That's the only way it would work for like lightning drivers, because they're gonna get an adapter in the mail, and they're gonna be told, okay, you can go use any Tesla supercharger.
And then they'll try and plug in
But
and it's
then
completely
most
not
of them
going.
aren't getting retrofitted yet. Like, it's only V4 that has the long cable. So V3 stations, even the ones with Magic Dock right now, I've seen videos, like people try to plug an F-150 Lightning in and it can't reach the cable.
Yeah, so they'll block a bunch of spots.
Yep, it'll be super great for Tesla owners, so enjoy that.
It's gonna be like a disaster.
That would be easier to just stay with the actual standard.
Yeah, it would be super easy if they had just stayed with CCS, but thanks Ford for making things more complicated and less interesting.
So we'll see how this shakes
More
out.
interesting, maybe we live in interesting times.
We'll
right?
see how this shakes out.
We'll see how it shakes out.
This may be a move also from Ford to try to get the US government to impose a standard.
Yeah. And that's it for the news. So we'll talk about that more in roundtable. So if you're watching live, you can stay after the updates and stuff. And if you're not watching live on YouTube, then you have to join our meeting so you can participate in the roundtable and complain about Ford or Tesla or me.
Just a comment from Terry, the new Honda is shown in Japan with Chatamo.
Well, yeah, that's because Japan is all Chatham.
Yeah, so cars sold in Japan still use Shadamo, and that's still the standard in Japan, right?
Not here.
There's no reason for them to, that's a predominant standard, so I don't think that's gonna
And
change.
then Mark said also, so new Fords won't have both CCS and Tesla Ford on board?
No, so it's possible they'll have both, but that would increase cost considerably. Monroe actually had an episode on that. It would make a big difference in the cost. The hardware for the Tesla standard is less expensive than CCS combo. So having both would increase the cost substantially. So I don't think they'll want to do both.
And actually, there's another misspell here, which is I see a lot of people saying that with the Tesla or NACS connector, your car needs more relays or contactors inside, and that's actually not true. I looked at Tesla's standard document, and they had another technical document explaining how it combines AC and DC charging in one plug. And your AC onboard charger is actually always connected to the power pins. It's just that it's designed to be able to withstand those voltages, even if it's not turned on. And so you only need one DC contactor, which you have in CCS anyway. So NACS is overall, it's just less complex in every way. Less contactors, less cables, smaller fittings, like everything is actually
Well, we can talk about this at the roundtable.
Can I just do a little point here?
Sure.
Because there was also a comment why my posts only go to your comments. So Terry, we do see the comments, but sometimes it's easier to ask them at the end of a presentation than interrupt and crash the flow. So anybody actually that is online, you can post and we'll see it.
Yeah, and you can speak up too if you really want to.
Well, at the roundtable, we'll unmute.
Yeah.
Mark.
Okay. And so thank you, Mike. Very interesting developments, lots of interesting developments. There's one you didn't cover that I don't know. I was looking for more details about it, and it's the EV charging corridor between Quebec City and somewhere in Michigan.
Oh, that.
But I couldn't.
I saw an article about that, and it's basically they're just announcing the Ivy network. So
Yeah,
I didn't really.
seem,
yeah.
and actually, I sent a letter to an email to the contact person, the press contact person, asking about heavy-duty charging, because to me, what would really make a difference is for them to put heavy-duty chargers at regular
For trucks,
intervals
yeah.
in that corridor to start it up, right?
Yeah.
Once that starts up, we'll see them deploying elsewhere. Anyways, very brief EVX update. We'll talk about EVX a lot when we get to the upcoming events. So this is, I just want to show a picture of the board, the way it looks today. Not everybody has seen it, but I just want to make sure people have seen it. It looks a lot better. And in response to many comments we had from some people, Craig, and others, we put something at the back of it that is designed to attract people to come and ask questions, right? So we're asking, what if you could fill up your car for $8, right? So rule of thumb is $2 per 100 kilometers, 400 kilometers worth of range, $8, right? So So the idea is to try to get people to come over. The other side is we've actually prettied up the display quite a bit. And you see on the left-hand side there, there's a charging station at level 2 there. That's the one we'll replace with the one we got from EV Duty from ELMEC.
Yeah.
And we'll replace a little box also, which is a real one on there. We'll replace it with a fake one we have so that Sam can get it back, okay? But just wanted to show that to you guys so you can see that. So what I found with the few shows that we've used this at, including the show in Gatineau, is people look at it a lot more now. And they ask questions a lot about it, right? So it's
We
really
were asking tons of questions before too, trust me.
yeah, but it seems to
But now they can read it too,
Yes.
so it's self-serve almost too. so
Yeah.
they can-
And that's,
yeah. So it's really made a big difference. I'm very happy we did this finally. So anyways, that's the extra stuff. So past events, we did a bunch of kilowatts and coffee. And I just saw there's someone in the US that's using the same name. They're using kilowatts and caffeine, I think.
Oh, well, that's different.
Anyway, so I did a bunch of them. Right now, outside in the wild, right? This picture here is from the garage, though. I just wanted to show there that it's kind of hard to see in the picture, but way at the bottom there on the right-hand side, there's an EV6, and then there's like 8 or 10 EVs along there. So lots of EVs. I don't think there's 2 that are the same. You see a Mach-E there, you see a whole bunch of the 94, right? So a whole bunch of different varieties of EVs. So it's nice to see that, right? So anyways, so other past events. So this weekend on Saturday, Mike and I and Jeff were at the Great League Garage Sale. So this is what we looked like there. We didn't have the trailer. That's because
Somebody didn't go pick it up the night before.
well, I did pick it up the night before because I thought I could pick it up the morning of.
somebody doesn't have a trailer yet.
No, the gate was locked and I didn't have the combination for the gate, so I had to go and pull out the tent and walk it around the gate. Same with the flags. But anyways, we'll fix that for next weekend. We'll have the trailer, right? Anyways. We talked to a lot of people. There was a lot of people. A lot of people just passed by and didn't want to know anything. They were looking for junk at the other tables around us. So it's definitely people outside the bubble. Some of the discussions I had were clearly people who had no idea about EVs. Okay, so this is good because we were educating some people who had really no idea at all, right? So we had some great conversations. And some weren't so great. So one person in particular told me that we ended up talking about, the person said, well, what about the coal plants that make all this? I said, well, in Ontario, we've closed all the coal plants and we're doing that all over the world. And he said, well, that's a real problem. When we do that, people are going to starve. And I'm thinking, how the hell is that possible?
In like 10 years,
Anyways.
nobody started.
Anyways, no, but he's just saying that about elsewhere too. So anyways, we had a few people like that were really hostile. So it was really.
That means you're doing the right job then.
Exactly. So, but lots of really good conversations. Lots of people got some good information from us. So that's the past events. One thing I didn't put on here is that I presented at the last transit commission meeting. And they had a report there about the e-buses that came out, so I'll comment in on that. Excellent report, no issues there. What I mentioned a couple of things. You saw the numbers from Mike earlier about the number of buses that OC Transport wants to buy. I said 2 things. First of all, get with the program. Toronto's announced their purchase. What's happening with OC Transport? And maybe you should purchase those 77 buses for next year now, so that we get in time, because I don't see how it's possible for them to get the 26 buses this year as they were supposed to be getting them, right? The other thing I mentioned, and this caused some confusion, I think, there's and I'm going to get, I think it's Milton, that they're working on a pilot where they're going to convert a diesel bus. So diesel buses, transit buses, they last 12 to 15 years. Midway through the life cycle of the bus, they do a total refit. They usually change the engine and the transmission, and they rebuild the bus and deal with all the corrosion issues and all that. So it's mega money, okay, lots of money. $200,000 and above that they spend on the vehicle.
But less than a bus, right?
Less than a bus. So if you look at the numbers from Milton, and I got the numbers, the differential between doing a retrofit to a diesel, yes, Mike, thank you. The difference between doing the retrofit to diesel or instead to retrofit it to a battery electric bus is about $400,000. If you look at the fact that OC Transpo will be saving more than $50,000 a year, so we had originally estimated they'd save $50,000 a year in the operational costs.
Per bus.
Per year, yes.
Per year.
So if the bus is refit halfway through it, it's good for another 6-7 years. You're going to save a bunch of money on operational costs, right?
And the resale value probably as well.
Sorry?
And the resale value might be going
The
up after.
resale value is not an
No,
issue.
but if it's now electric instead of diesel.
Yeah, but
It might even
that-
last
that's
longer.
not, I'm not worried about it might last longer, but I'm not worried about that part. Just worried about the 7 years that, they would be diesel. So the reason I brought this up, and actually I forgot to mention it because I'll tell you a little secret here. I fell asleep during the meeting and I woke up like 30 seconds before I had the time. So anyways, the mayor promised during the electoral campaign that by 2030, every bus at OC Transport would be either electric or hybrid, okay? So my point essentially was, well, hybrid now, you've been down that road, and we know it doesn't reduce emissions that much anyway. So that's a non-starter, right? So electric buses are the only option, and if you want them all to be electric by 2030, well, that means you have to convert the buses that were bought in the last few years because they're slated to last another 15 years.
But that should be doable because they're all Nova buses and Nova has an electric version, so.
Well, there's a whole bunch of things there, but bottom line is if Milton has a successful pilot, there should be an option to do that. And my point is not that they should do it with every bus. My point is they should look at that as a possibility, and actually they should forget about sorry, David, they should forget about looking at hydrogen for the buses, okay? So anyways, interesting, I need to follow up with them about that because I think the message didn't get through the way I want to do. So I need to refresh it. So upcoming events, so we have our next monthly meeting, June 26th, here again, hopefully, right? Maybe in the other room for a small group. Kilowatts and coffee, so we may add an event on the 17th of June, right? Mike, because we don't have anything that weekend. We do have something the week after, but it's a small event anyway, so we'll talk about that. What else is coming up? So the Blackburn Fun Fair, we talked about that before. Many of you have expressed interest in participating. Please, if you would like to participate, add your name to the spreadsheet. Just so you know, we're borrowing 2 Teslas. A Tesla Model 3. The reason we're borrowing a Tesla Model 3 is because Darren, his Tesla was damaged when he hit a raccoon. So sorry, Darren, but actually I had a raccoon picture earlier today. I don't know if you saw it. We had raccoons in our front yard. Anyways, baby raccoons are real cute. But I guess the one that Darren hit wasn't so cute, especially after he hit it. But anyways, damaged his car.
You're gonna have to edit.
I'm gonna have to edit so much.
Why? There's nothing wrong with that.
Just focus.
So anyways,
Give me some room to split this.
So we'll have the Model 3 that Darren will be mostly using for test drives. And we'll have a Model S again, or another Model S, and Nicola will be mostly doing test drives with that one. But anyways, I've also talked to Jim Kay in Orleans, and they actually have 5 Maquis on the lot right now. 3 of them are used. So I've asked them if they could borrow some of the used ones, and we're going to be able to borrow one of them, it looks like. They're supposed to get back to me. The other thing I've asked them is if we could borrow, at least for display purposes, one of their F-150 Lightnings. They've got one that's not spoken for, okay? So, okay? I don't know. but it's not spoken for. It's right in front of the delivery if you want to go see it, and it's right in front in the berm right on the street.
Run, don't walk.
And so I've asked them if we could have one. They have others also, so if we could have one of them there for display to show it, because I think that a lot of people who go to the Blackbird Fun Fair, they might not know that these things exist, right? So this would be ideal. And actually, it's got decals on it saying this electric and all that because they had it at Fezolayan a few weekends ago. So same with the Mach-E that we may borrow. It probably is the one that has decals on it. But the idea with the Mach-E is Mitchell would be using it for test drives because he knows it well, but we'll need other people to help because Mitchell's only available on the 7th, I think. Yes.
Darren has a comment.
Sure.
I have the video showing the raccoon crossing the road without looking, 80 kilometers speed limit. The raccoon did not have insurance. Even though it was hit.
So he's trying to blame it on the raccoon, eh? Okay, sure. Anyways, so Darren is trying to get it fixed. He's supposed to bring it to get fixed tomorrow, I think, actually, but we're not sure if he's going to get it back. Bottom line is, we're going to borrow 2 cars and we should be okay there. I tried to borrow other cars. I may get a BZ4X, okay? 20 grand.
Do we have insurance on the wheels? Make sure you don't fall off.
Oh! You'll have to cut that out. No, so we may have a BZ4X because I contacted Tony Graham for other reasons, which we'll talk about later. And they have one coming in soon. It's got 200 kilometers on it. So it'd be nice to actually have it to show it because some people, I was told again on the weekend, someone told me, I'll never buy anything but Toyota. Well, okay. If you're not going to buy anything but Toyota.
Actually, I've seen quite a bit of them on the road on the Quebec side, most of them.
Yeah.
But they are out.
Yeah. So the problem though is Tony Graham he's been told he cannot get any to sell because he's not in Quebec or BC, right? Which is very frustrating, especially since he's close to Quebec. Anyways, he can sell them to Quebec customers. Anyways, if you're interested, we have the booth, we have test drives, we'll have EnviroCenter there to help us, so this should be a lot of fun. We've changed the location a bit. We'll be closer to the arena, so it'll be more in the path of people coming in, okay? So that should mean we'll have more traffic and more test drives. On the weekend in the Glebe, we handed out cards like there was no tomorrow, telling people that they could do test drives at Blackburn, and a lot of people seem to be interested. And I know there's bookings already that have occurred.
I didn't receive emails.
You did not?
Receive emails for booking?
You haven't yet? No? So anyways, there should be some coming in. I know there's a few bookings that have already been done. Anyway, so it should be pretty busy. There'll be a parade from 10 to 11 on the Saturday morning. I will participate in the parade. I think everybody else can go to the site if you want to, or participate in the parade if you desire. Okay. There is a theme to the parade. I'm trying to think what
Doesn't matter. Next.
We may need decorations, and I may need some help for decorations. Anyways, so next Monday, June 5th. This is not an EVCO event. But there's a rally that's been organized by the Suzuki Foundation or something of the sort for renewable power. Okay, so you're probably aware that Doug Ford has decided that he's mandated that they build new gas plants in Ontario. So the idea here is to have a rally to talk about making sure that we get the 5th noon to 1:30 p.m. at Parliament Hill. Okay. So if you're interested, have time, please come over. So June 19th, this is a daytime event on the Monday, 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. We're going to be doing some test drives. If you are available during the day at that time, please sign up. But we're not expecting a lot of people on our side because it's during the day. But we would like to have at least a good, a few cars anyways, so that we can have a good event. There we go. Okay, the next event after that is Seats for Kids. So Mike's wife is very involved in this organization, and what they do is they teach people how to properly install child seats in cars, And they also help provide seats for people who can't afford them, okay? So we're doing this Sunday, June 25th, 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. We'll be doing test drives, okay? And this is on Walkley Road in the East End, okay? And that's everything here is on the spreadsheet. So please go and sign up if you're interested, if you have time. We certainly could use the help. So this one here, this is a booth only, okay? It's also on Walkley, not too far from the other location, but it's July 15th as Capital Cruise for Kids Car and Bike Show for CHIO, long title. But anyways, so we're there from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. a fairly long day. So there's separated into 2 shifts. So if you're interested, please come along.
If it's for kids, does the purple Tesla work there?
Actually, yeah.
You know, yeah.
Yeah, that'd be fine.
That'd be good. Yeah.
It's a booth only, but that means also cars. Like we need cars to static display.
Yes, we need cars for static display. Yeah.
So if you have a cool car.
Yeah, the purple will interest a lot of kids for sure. So yeah, absolutely. So please sign up if you're available. We'd like to have you. By the way, we'll probably have a few other events that'll fill in here, but we don't have them for sure.
Also, I should mention that if you're an EVCO member but not an EVX volunteer, we do have an onboarding process for that. So just reach out to one of us.
Yes.
Or email volunteer@evco.ca, and we'll get you set up with EVX stuff, because he keeps referring to the spreadsheet. And if you're already an EVX volunteer, then you already know what that means. But if you're not and you want to help out, then by all means, yeah, send us an email and we'll set you up.
And please, if you have any interest, please sign up. The onboarding process is not very hard. You have to listen to a boring presentation. Is it me or is you?
Yeah, but I edited you down to be less time consuming.
It's YouTube, so you can run it at
1.5
speed or twice.
I cut out all the ums.
You cut out the okays?
Yep.
Okay, good. So next event, this is a bit further, so again, we may have some fillers in between. August 26th, Saturday, 12 p.m. to 8 p.m. Again, this is really outside the bubble. On Bank Street somewhere, we'll have a booth, and there'll be 2 shifts. So the booth there's other booths of other things. So I know the Liberals, for example, have a booth there. So there's different organizations that bring different booths. So we'll have a few cars and a booth, and we'll talk to people about
That's where you want the purple.
Absolutely. I will be
and that
there.
T-shirt you have there.
Actually, yeah.
You know what? The Y is wrong. You got the wrong.
I know.
Yeah.
I'm so
Anyways, you should complain.
Anyways, what do you say? Teespring,
Yeah. So the bad news out of all of this here is that the event at the UI Center is unfortunately canceled, okay?
After all that.
Yeah, after all that. Anyways, it's been, I've learned a lot and I've made a lot of contacts, so it's not all bad. However, so Jean-Pierre, the promoter, he's been showing signs for a while of having cold feet, and even from the outset, he wasn't sure that it was possible to make the show in Ottawa. Anyways, bottom line is he decided to pull out, so we've canceled the venue. So we won't be doing something that weekend, unfortunately. Very disappointed of that, but that being said, that does give us an opportunity to do something else. Just like we did last year, this is from last year. We'll do an advanced SmartNet Coalition now. It's not SmartNet Alliance anymore, SmartNet Coalition. They want to do the sustainability fair that they've had before and EV showcase. So we want to do test drives. We had decided not to do test drives because we were doing the October event. So instead we'll do test drives, and we'll try to get the No-Seats Transfer Plus like we had last year and a few other goodies there so that we could have a more complete event, right? So I've talked to some dealers, which I'm in contacts because of the other show, and many dealers are interested in participating here, especially since it'll be considerably less expensive and a smaller commitment of time and all that. So I'm expecting that we'll be able to get lots of dealers there. And I would like to have as many of you as possible participating also. Okay, so I say the time is tentative there. This year, contrary to most years where we've had this event, there is no football game on the same day. Okay, in the past, yeah.
Well, actually, it was nice for the outside the bubble part, but it was.
Yeah. So the problem we had in the previous years is either we had a Red Blacks game or we had, even worse, there was a Panda game. So we had some very inebriated students going through our displays. And anyways, I'm reminded of one girl that was accompanied. Anyways, yeah, so it should be a lot better. We will probably start it at 10, so we'll want people to be there earlier, obviously, but we may end a bit later. We'll see. The reason we had 10 p.m. 4 p.m. before is because they wanted us out of there for 4, so that the traffic going out can go out and there'd be no conflict. Okay, so we'll see how it goes. We're starting more detailed planning over the next coming weeks. Okay. So that's it. Next item we have. This is we don't have the details of the location, all that yet, but we'll do a test drive event, West Bar Haven. I don't know if you have more details on it, but October 14th, the people over there for some reason want to do it on October 14th. So we said, sure, we'll do it then. It is a bit late in the season, and we even though we had the end of October event, the big show at the UI Center, right? Normally we try to end activities at the end of September because the weather becomes a bit iffier after that, right? We could have 30 degrees weather on the 14th of October, we could have snow, we don't know, right?
Probably just rain.
Probably rain, it's the time of the year where there's a lot of rain, right? So, reminder, so we no longer have 48 subscribers, we have how many subscribers?
69.
69, damn it.
No, really? No, 69.
So the reminder there is we put recordings of these meetings and other goodies on there. So I would certainly encourage you to refer to this, and there's a few goodies in there that you may use as material. If you have friends asking you about, the MIST, the EVs and all that, well, now we have the presentations. This is really old screenshot, but we have the presentations that Mike and I did for the city about a month ago, I guess. They're on there. So one in French, one in English. So you could use that as a resource. Any questions about the events? Any questions? No questions about the events? No? Okay, please go to the spreadsheet. Those of you who know about the spreadsheet. Those who don't and like to participate, again, volunteer at EVCO.ca, and we'll set you up to be able to do that. Now, I did mention at the beginning that there's a few surveys. There's one that we sent out an email. Darren sent out an email. I think it's this one. I'm not sure. Pollution Probe 1. So they have a survey. They want to do it annually, and they're trying to measure the pulse of the public about EV charging. So please, if you have an opportunity, I would encourage you to go and fill out the survey. There's another survey from the Ontario Cabinet. So they have a research office of some sort. What you do is when you fill out the survey, it's essentially something that says, I'm not sure if they're going to contact everybody that fills out the survey or what, but they're going to give you, selected volunteers, like it says, will receive a $60 gift card. So they'll do a fairly long 45-minute to 60-minute interview. So, obviously it'd be great if as many of us as possible could be selected for that. That's not about the $60 gift card. It's about making sure they really get a good feel for what the situation is in terms of. They're also doing research on charging, okay, in particular. So the other thing that I did mention at the beginning is there is something that I just found. I think I found this in the Hydro Ottawa newsletter. I think it was, or it may have been Electric Autonomy. Anyways. There's a program called Peak Perks program that's coming up at some point where you'll be able to, the utility will be able to do things like turn down your air conditioning up to 10 times a year or something of the sort. And they will give you $75 to enroll and $20 per year after that, right? So you could sign up for the program to get notified when the program gets put in place. But there's no commitment at this point. They don't have all the details. But if you go to saveenergy.ca/ peak perks. You could sign up and get notified for the program. One thing I forgot to say here is the Ontario Cabinet Survey, the deadline is today to fill it out. Okay,
Let's do it now.
sorry. Okay, but this has been circulated before, so I'm not, it's been on Facebook and all that. So I suspect a lot of you would have already participated. So the very last thing I think I have on the deck is that the Ontario Energy Board is doing a study looking at commercial EV charging issues. Okay, so and the deadline for feedback is, not sure if it's June 7th or 6th. Anyway, I'll provide feedback on behalf of EVCO. I was at an information session last week on this, and what they're doing is they're looking at, for residential customers, we have the overnight, ultra-low overnight rates, and we have the time of day, time of use rates, and all this kind of stuff. That does not exist in the commercial sector. It's a whole different story. Okay, so what they're looking at is they're looking at the challenges of the Tim Hortons that have a few chargers and they get overcharged for the electricity. They're looking at commercial fleets that we want to incent them to charge at night, right? And there's no time of use fees for them. They're looking at other situations like that. The other situation is providers, larger providers like the Teslas and the IVs and the others, and how could they pay for electricity and how could that be adjusted to make the business case better and to make it fair for various situations. What they find is because of demand charges, if you put a charger in an isolated location and it doesn't get very much use, you end up paying much more for the electricity. So even though it doesn't get used much, you pay a lot more for the electricity. The way electricity billing is done is really, really complicated when you look at the commercial side of stuff. So anyways, they're looking for feedback as to ways that they could, they're proposing some solutions and they want feedback on the solutions they're proposing to try to eliminate some of these challenges, right? So, okay. Again, deadline for feedback is soon, either the 6th or the 7th. I think that is it.
So if you're watching us on YouTube, this is where your video ends. If you're watching us live on Teams, stick around for the roundtable. You can unmute yourself. We do have the speakers going. But for the YouTube watchers, thank you for watching. We'll be back next month. See you next month.